From the European Parliament in Brussels, this is Raw Politics. Thanks for joining us tonight, and this is what we have on the program. Draft Day, the 27 men and women chosen to set the course for the EU. Brexit shutdown, outrage as the UK Parliament is put on ice right before a critical deadline. Sideline Salvini, Italy's former interior minister, vows to retake control of the country. Neo-Nazi mayor, outrage as neo-Nazi is elected mayor of a German town. And the best of Bercow, the larger-than-life common speaker in a Raw Moment tribute. All right, it is time to meet our panelists this evening. We have joining us Sophie Unveiled. She is a Dutch MEP with the Renew Group. Hi, Sophie. So which of these stories are you watching closely?
These days, it's difficult to choose. Of course, Brexit is on 24/7. But today, of course, we're watching the presentation of the new Commission that has yet to get the approval of the European Parliament. And I was particularly struck by the creation of the new portfolio of protection of the European way of life.
Indeed, which we will be talking about today. Quite a discussion there. Okay, also joining us, Antonio Lopez Isturiz. He is a Spanish MEP and Secretary General of the European People's Party. What about you? What are you watching closely?
Well, I'm not struck. I'm happy, and I think it's a fantastic occasion that we have this new portfolio. By the way, driven by a full professional like Margarita Sinas, soon to become, if elected by the Parliament as Vice President.
The new Commission as well.
Yes,
okay,
yes, I'm
that's
watching,
a big thing happening here in Brussels today, in case you didn't notice. Okay, also joining us, James Crisp. He's a Brussels correspondent for The Telegraph. What about you, James?
Well, I'm going to unsurprisingly go for Brexit, and I particularly noticed with the new Commission that we have Phil Hogan taking over the trade portfolio. Phil Hogan is Ireland's commissioner, not a fan of Brexit, and he'll be responsible for handling the trade negotiations with Britain after Brexit, which has ruffled a few feathers.
You did link that to what's happening here. I mean, Brexit has been a big story, but we'll focus on Brussels tonight. That's where we're beginning, because a brand new commission has been chosen, as Sophie has said earlier, because President-elect Ursula von der Leyen, she unveiled her choices for commissioners this afternoon. Now, it is the most gender-balanced team ever, with 13 women among the appointees. And we'll get into the details of all of that, as well as the surprises in just a minute. But first, here is how Ursula von der Leyen summed up her team and its mission earlier today.
It draws on all these strengths and talents, men and women, experienced and young, east and west, south and north, a team that is well balanced, a team that brings together diversity of experience and competence. I want a commission that is led with determination, that is clearly focused on the issues at hand, and that provides answers.
Well, let's get the latest from our correspondent, Brian Carter, who's joining us now live from the European Commission. So, Brian, what are the biggest surprises that you saw today in today's announcements?
Well, I think you already heard it from some of your panelists here today on the show. One of the surprises came for the portfolio of Margaret Vestager. She used to be the commissioner in charge of competition, and she will keep that portfolio for the next 5 years, but she will also oversee this digital agenda. As you know, the EU wants to become a leader of the digital economy, and they put somebody like Margaret Vestager, one of the few recognizable faces here in Brussels, one of the person who became very well known across Europe and across the world. Donald Trump doesn't like her very much for imposing fines and for battling against tech giants. The second surprise came at the nomination, or rather the portfolio that Laszlo Trocani received. He's the Hungarian commissioner. He used to be the justice minister under Viktor Orban, and this is a man who oversaw and who worked hand in hand to undermine the rule of law, who promoted anti-migrant, anti anti-NGO, anti-free press laws in Hungary. And now he will be charged with enlargement and neighborhood policy, so essentially making sure that the candidates to become new members of the European Union respect the rule of law. So this is a very controversial post. And then finally, as you heard before from your panelists there today, the portfolio of Margaritis Schinas, Protecting Our European Way of Life, which has created a lot of controversy online, because actually is the portfolio in charge of migration. And when you hear Protecting Our European Way of Life, it has a very anti-migrant tone to it. Some people already say that Ursula von der Leyen is they're adopting sort of the language of the far right when talking about migration.
Okay, of course. So those are just a few of the surprises that we saw. But, you know, one of the things that Ursula von der Leyen has put emphasis on is obviously the climate. It's such a big portfolio. So what happened with that? A lot of eyes were looking at that climate and the environment. So who got that one?
So the person that will oversee, as executive vice president of the commission, oversee this transition towards a carbon neutral economy is Frans Timmermans, who used to be the lead candidate for the S&D group, a very influential figure here in Brussels. He will be in charge of climate, making sure that this issue is really at the core, is embedded with every single policy that the commission will be trying to put forward in the next 5 years. And then the other person that we're looking at in terms of climate is the 28-year-old commissioner from Lithuania, Virginijus Sinkevičius. Sorry if I mispronounced that. He's the only green affiliated commissioner in this new College of Commissioners, and he will oversee environment and oceans.
All right, thanks for that, Brian Carter there. Okay, let's get right to it. I mean, you guys already touched on what struck you most in this commission. So again, Sophie, let's go with you.
Yes, well, there are lots of things there. You get the feeling that she has created a commission that's intended to please all the national capitals, and that's going to be very difficult. If we're talking about a portfolio called the Protection of the European Way of Life, and Mrs. von der Leyen connects this to migration, that sounds very, very unpleasant. I would say, you know, protecting the European way of life means we do not build fences, we do not lock refugees up in containers, we don't send them to detention camps in Libya, and we don't let them drown in the Mediterranean. But it very much echoes the kind of language and views of Mr. Orban. And she will also need to get the majority of the European Parliament behind her.
Yeah, this is certainly one that got a lot of reaction online. I mean, some were even joking, like, what does the European way of life mean? Does it relate it to cheese? But then on a more serious note, you know, what kind of tone and message is this said? Do you agree with Sophie
Well, I said it on the beginning, but I was set up. I said I am happy because I believe you are taking wrongly the whole thing about this protecting the European way of life. I think that, you know, people are not happy because I think that Ursula has obtained a very well-balanced commission. And this will make a lot of people very unhappy.
What,
I know, because she's a president from the EPP. I have heard very good words about Frans Timmermans.
Well, you are from the same party, so we would...
But the EPP, there were doubts about Schinas, about the Hungarian, about the other. Let me explain to you. The European way of life, the immigrants are included. What we are helping here is to maintain our very exclusive, and has always been, and this is something that we could export, our healthcare system, our pension system that is in danger. We have to work to maintain it.
This is one way. This is one way of looking at it, but you can't deny that there's another way that you interpreted it. James, what do you think about this portfolio that's
I mean, look,
controversial?
It comes across as a dog whistle. If people think it's a dog whistle, just change the name. Problem solved.
Exactly.
I mean, you know, the idea that this is all some sort of part of a conspiracy of the EP against the EPP is, with respect, garbage. I mean, really, I think that we should also be talking about how Paolo Gentiloni is going to be put in charge of the economy portfolio. When Italy's
not the BPS,
about to break all the EU.
It's not the BPS, so...
Right, yeah, but I mean, what does this mean, though, when you have these people, controversial as Brian was pointing out, like for the Hungary portfolio, the Italy portfolio dealing with economy. What signal? Okay.
It's not the Hungary portfolio, the Italy portfolio.
Solly.
One of the things that strikes me about this commission is it's very much the commission of the national governments. I mean, national governments who in recent weeks in the media were saying, oh, you know, we claim this portfolio, this other country claims the other portfolio. The Commission is supposed to be independent, serving all the citizens equally. The portfolio does not belong to a country.
But your very good friend Margaritis has said to me on the podium when I asked him about the migration policy, you know, and the EU-Turkey deal, he said to me, well, we are merely here to administer the will of the member states. You know, those words fell from his lips.
And then he should read the treaties, because the treaties are very specific. The European Commission cannot take orders from any member state.
Okay.
So this is a problem.
You know,
in that I agree.
You agree. So what's interesting about here is, do you think that, I feel like there is a bit of a rebranding or remessaging here with the names. Correct me if I'm wrong. So you have that protecting the European way of life. You have a new push for European democracy, a stronger Europe in the world, an economy that works for the people. It sounds more like slogans than job posts. What is happening here? Is it a way to connect with people, or what is it?
Rather than a civil servant.
Well, this is new politics. Look, Macron, it's all about the messages.
So it's a game of politics.
You know?
What is
now
this?
it's time to implement these messages. First, there has to be the presentation. We have to arrive to people.
But you've got the presentation
Journalists have
wrong.
to translate this to the people. And then comes, you know, this is like Macron's, you know, policy. You know, a lot of image, a lot of messages. But then we have to do, well, this when the PP comes, we will make that done.
So you think this is talking to the people? Is it talking to the people?
Yeah, we have to.
I don't think it's talking
I think
to
why
people.
not?
Explain.
I think that the interest in the new commission is limited to Brussels.
Are these the usual civil servant-based phrases? Are these the usual chit-chat of the Brussels civil servant? This new? No, I think this is something that people will understand.
But the people we should be talking to, first of all, the people we should be talking to are the 51% of people who turned up at the European elections, a higher turnout than in the last 30 years. So people in particular, because young people went to vote, and they are expecting answers. Are the slogans the answer? I don't think so, frankly. The other people we should be speaking to are the likes of Trump. We have to show that the European Union is strong, united, self-confident, and we have a vision for the future. And the problem is that we are, you know, we are still in the lead, but we're slowly lagging behind the United States, China.
But to be fair, actually, giving Vestager the competition portfolio again, you know, I mean, that's...
It's a message in itself, isn't it?
That's a message, and it's kind of a shrewd move. You know, she's highly popular here. She's popular with the member states.
Yeah. Well, I would say with the Brussels bubble, not with the member states.
But were you surprised by that?
She shouldn't be popular with the member states.
It's unprecedented.
It's unprecedented.
It's unprecedented that a competition commissioner gets a second term. It's never happened before.
So what is that meant to do? That's it. The European Union will take a stand on competition, or what is that?
It means that she can carry on seeing all the court cases that she's begun
and
a
lot. And if you have digital at the same time, you know, means that she can tackle the tech giants. I would, though, say that the digital agenda should be much broader and also include, you know, data protection, privacy, ethical issues on artificial intelligence.
Okay. So very quickly, if I think I can ask in a word, what kind of commission will von der Leyen's be? How would you describe it in a word?
I think that it will be effective. And it's going to be implementing many of the things that are shown in this paper.
Sophie, a word to describe. Expectations, maybe.
It's not clear to me yet, I have to say. It's not clear.
White. It's very, very white.
That's another point that we have not touched on today. All right, well, beginning to display the beginning of this new era we've been talking about, there's a banner of Ursula von der Leyen just outside our studio, in fact, that has gone up, so here at the Parliament, and it has caused quite the storm. So Alex in the Cube has this part of the story. Alex, so tell us, what are people saying, and what is this?
Well, Tessa, before we go into why the banner's controversial, let's remind ourselves of this. Remember Raw Questions? You and Darren hosting it, taking questions to these guys. Remember these guys? One of them was going to be the president of the European Commission. This was literally the poster for the campaign, the Spitzenkandidat process. The lead candidate from the political group with the largest number of seats would become the Commission president. Let's not forget, we went big on this. So too did there was that big debate, wasn't there? The EBU debate again, where the people were told this was how their votes were going to work. Well, actually, in the end, all of these candidates had one thing in common, perhaps none of them thought would happen. And that is, None of them got the job. Instead, yes, it was Ursula von der Leyen. And then this is that poster. And now you get a sense of why this quote here is a little controversial. In free and fair elections, it says, next to a big image of Ursula von der Leyen, the power of the people determines the people in power. Hashtag elected. Well, needless to say, opponents to the way Ursula von der Leyen was selected and put forward to that final vote by MEPs jumped on this. One of them was Martin Daubney of the Brexit Party, saying Ursula von der Leyen was inserted above the MEPs themselves. Let's forget she was not a Spitzenkandidat. We never saw her debate. We never interviewed her. She was the German defence minister. She wasn't in the running, so much so that the betting agency Ladbrokes decided that she was excellent news when she eventually got the job. Because, of course, she wasn't one that we'd been putting all this emphasis, all this scrutiny on in the lead-up. People hadn't presumably been putting much money on her. So when you have some people celebrating Madame la Présidente here, saying, yes, the female president of the Commission, you have others like Martin Daubney saying, is this the free and fair elections that this big poster, this massive quote, makes her out to be? So we asked the Commission, why have you put up this big poster outside the Parliament? The Commission said, don't talk to us, talk to the Parliament. So Matthew picked up the phone, Helena as well in the Cube, picked up the phone to the Parliament, and they said, well, we haven't got any answers on this. You'll have to take a look at this press release from July when she was appointed. So seemingly a question about exactly who thought this was a good idea, whether the wording was controversial, we can't get a straight answer. But Green MEP Daniel Freund here, let's not forget the Greens really opposed to the Spitzenkandidat process effectively being binned here. This is what he said to us in a short interview about why he, as an elected MEP, found this poster a little weird.
Well, when I saw it, obviously I was a bit surprised for a Commission president that did not run in the European elections, that was not one of the Spitzenkandidaten, and that kind of appeared on the scene as a bit of a surprise when she was nominated by the council. Then to have a poster where it speaks of election by the people in power with the hashtag elected, I found that slightly confusing for what had actually happened after the European elections.
Now, one last quick point at the end here. Let's not forget that it is the European Parliament who did confirm Ursula von der Leyen. So in a sense, yes, she is elected, but whether or not it's that big, free and fair poster-style election, that is what's got people talking on social.
All right, thank you for that, Alex. So, in reaction to that, it's hashtag elected. What is that messaging again?
Look, I mean, this is it. It's the fact is that the European Union institutions are not good at communications. One of the great tragedies of Brexit is that it's actually made the European Commission look like it is good at communications, just because the British side has been so atrociously awful. But now we're seeing the reality, which is when you have protecting the European way of life and a poster that's tin-eared.
What do you think? Did you see it outside? What did you think of that? It is the Parliament.
I think Parliament has missed an opportunity here, and what we need to do very, very urgently is make sure that the way that we elect or we choose our political leaders becomes democratic, finally, because this looks more like the Vatican, you know, where the leader is chosen behind closed doors
trying to convince
and then comes out on the balcony and is shown to the people. Sorry, this is becoming a parliamentary, Europe is becoming a parliamentary democracy. That means the people have to choose their own political leaders.
Okay, very quick comment on that. I mean, you have hashtag elected or still was she selected?
First,
Why?
we are too many slogans, communicational slogans. Now it's too less communication. I don't know where we are here. Let me tell you, I agree with Sophie. The question of the Spitzenkandidat, by the way, I'm of the ones that we will come back. I know. People have to vote directly to the President of the European Commission. This is our dream. But we know we cannot change it from one day or the other. The Spitzenkandidat was a very humble approach trying to help in this.
So you think it's a step in the right direction then?
People still do not vote directly.
Right.
Okay? We will come back to that.
Okay.
We will come. And Ursula von der Leyen was one of the comments he made.
Vote down all the commissioners. Make a stand. Show some...
Well, there's a suggestion from James. Okay,
down.
we'll leave it at that for now. Let's move on. Let's turn to Germany now, because there was an election of a neo-Nazi mayor, and it has sparked quite an outrage. Let's take a look at this. Welcome to Weißsiedlung, a sleepy German village hitting the headlines, thanks to this man, the new neo-Nazi mayor. Stefan Jax of the far-right National Democratic Party was unanimously elected by the community's 7 councillors. Why? Well, he was the only person who wanted the job. But he might not get to take up post after all. The local council reportedly moving to reverse his election after outcry from mainstream parties.
Das ist etwas, was überhaupt nicht hinnehmbar ist. Wir Sozialdemokraten wählen keine Nazis und deswegen muss das jetzt ganz schnell auch rückgängig gemacht werden. Und ich fordere alle auf, dass wir sehr schnell diesen Nazi wieder abwählen.
Das war ein Faustschlag für unsere Demokratie. Es darf keine Zusammenarbeit mit NPD oder AfD geben.
As for the man himself,
ich finde diese ganze Kritik und diesen Aufschrei, den es im Moment gibt, total lächerlich. Und es ist peinlich, was da vonstatten geht. Es ist ein Armutszeugnis für die Demokratie, wie die Vertreter der anderen Parteien auf ihre gewählten Abgeordneten reagieren und diese unter Druck setzen und versuchen, zu dieser Abwahl zu drängen.
After several unsuccessful attempts to ban the NPD, this small German village is reviving a big debate over the banning of the far right from German politics. All right, well, you know, there were moves to have this party banned. It was taken to court, but Germany's constitutional court said that the parties, although has been deemed hostile, it does not have the potential to upend democracy in Germany, so they turned that down. Do you think that was right?
Look, I can't judge a court ruling, but I think it is very clear that we have to be much more outspoken against this kind of extremism. It has kind of crept into politics, and you know, many centrist political parties have embraced these right-wing views, have made them somehow acceptable, and we should make it very clear they're not acceptable.
To the point of banning them,
no.
is the question.
No, but that's another matter. I'm talking about countering this with political means, and I think we should be.
So you don't think you can't, even if it considered neo-Nazi.
You can't ban political parties. People have a right to set up political parties. They might be total scumbags. In fact, you know, this fella clearly is a total scumbag. But you know, as soon as you start banning parties, I don't draw the line.
Okay.
No, but there is a question of public funding.
The problem is deeper because, as you heard well the news, there was no candidate. No one wanted to run. This is something that we should follow in an interesting, quick reaction from the CDU, from the FPO, and from the Socialists.
So you will follow up on this.
But this cannot. This kind of no one was presenting, substituted by a neo-Nazi. This has to be.
All right. So lots of questions raised. Okay,
followed.
5 seconds because we have to go.
I was just going to say you're absolutely right. You know, it's the apathy towards local politics which has allowed this to happen, and that's actually the real story rather than
this story raising a lot of other issues around it. All right, coming up on Raw Politics, 6 defeats in 6 days, and our parliament shut down. So what will Boris Johnson do next? Plus, he entered as Speaker of the House, but he is leaving a Brexit celebrity. The best of John Bercow in tonight's Raw Moment. Welcome back to Raw Politics. There were scenes of chaos that engulfed the UK House of Commons last night as 2 weeks of drama, confusion and frustration reached a crescendo. Now, with Boris Johnson's second attempt at a general election falling flat before he officially suspended Parliament for 5 weeks, it was really a Brexit grand finale. Let's take a look.
I earlier urged the House to trust the people, but once again the opposition think they know better.
I think we've had quite enough of the playground politics, the Conservative Party this evening.
This government will press on with negotiating a deal while preparing to leave without one.
Mr. Speaker, this government is a disgrace, and the way the Prime Minister operates is a disgrace.
I require no response from you. I require no response from you.
Well, with 5 weeks to go before a deal is meant to be found and 7 before the UK is meant to be leaving the EU, let's see what is meant to happen next in the next 5 weeks. So there are some key dates to look for. So the 14th, that is when the UK Parliament reconvenes with the Queen's speech. Also, we have the 17th and 18th, big day in Brussels, the last EU summit before the October 31st deadline. We also have the 19th. Now, that is the last day that Boris Johnson needs to find a deal or get leaders to agree to a no deal. And of course, the 31st of October, that date, well, the UK is meant to be leaving on that day. We don't know if they will or they won't. All right, those are a lot of key dates. We have our correspondent Tig Enright standing by for us in London. So a lot of things that we're looking forward to in the next 5 weeks. So bring us up to speed on what we can look forward to.
Hi, Tessa. Well, listen, Boris Johnson says that he has got a plan to achieve a deal and that he's confident it can be done within this tight time frame. But we've had precious little to zero detail on what's in the plan, and whether he actually believes it can be done is another thing altogether. But today we were told that he expects to meet EU leaders again very soon. And one potential which is doing the rounds is that perhaps the dreaded Irish backstop is replaced with one that covers just Northern Ireland rather than the whole of the UK. Remember, that was actually the original plan with the backstop, but because Theresa May relied on the Northern Irish DUP party, who didn't like it, didn't like any separation between the UK or between Britain and Northern Ireland, it went out the window. But of course, Boris Johnson has now thrown that majority out the window, and he's angling for a general election. So perhaps that could be next for the chop. It was something which was speculation dampened by Downing Street today, but it's not the first time they said one thing in public and meant something entirely different. But the other thing we heard from Cabinet today is that Boris Johnson intends to spend the next 5 weeks focusing on his domestic agenda, health, crime, tackling the cost of living. And that sounds very much like a general election campaign, and probably because it is. And even though there won't be a general election before October 31st, as Boris Johnson had wanted, it doesn't mean that there won't be one happening very soon. And a key plank of his campaign to effectively neutralise Nigel Farage's Brexit party is this appearance, this willingness to take on to actually have a no-deal Brexit and Britain leaving the EU on October 31st, regardless of whether there is a deal in place or not. And I think what we can expect in that over the next 5 weeks is him to also try to seek to find some kind of legal way of avoiding or getting around this new law that seeks to prevent no deal. So definitely we are in campaign mode, and my expectation would be that in 5 weeks' time, when this Parliament sits again, we're possibly going to have another showdown with the opposition, perhaps bringing about the confidence motion, which on paper Boris Johnson should not want, but in practice he might just want to bring about the general election he's been angling for ever since he took office. Tessa?
All right, thank you for that, Tig Enright. Okay, so joining us for this discussion, we have Geoffrey Van Orden. He's a British MEP with the European Conservatives and Reformist Group. And we also have Shada Islam, Director of Europe and Geopolitics at Friends of Europe. And still with us, Sophie Intveld, Dutch MEP with the Renew Group. All right, Geoffrey, I'll start with you. I mean, with Boris Johnson saying that, he's still confident that there's going to be a deal, it seems to imply that there are negotiations happening. But when you talk to the EU here, we seem to get the impression that it has stalled. Who is telling the truth? What is the state of negotiations?
Well, I think the less said in public, I have to say, and on the media and even in Parliament about the nature of the discussions that are taking place, the less said, the more likely we are to arrive at the right sort of conclusion. The British people want to get over and done with Brexit, as I'm sure people on the continent do. So you believe there are
discussions, but I mean...
Yes, I'm absolutely sure there are discussions, and I'm also quite sure that the objections that we are meeting are political objections rather than practical objections.
Is that the correct impression to have from the EU side? Because it seems... Okay, you're looking very skeptically at Geoffrey.
Well, maybe I'm living on a different planet, but from where I live, it looks very different. You can see that the leaders of the other European countries are getting incredibly impatient, not just with what has happened over the past 3 years, but these claims by Boris Johnson that he's negotiating, he has a plan, but he won't tell anybody about it. So, like if he has a magic wand, he can make it happen. Well, he can then put it on the table, but it's pretty obvious that he has no plan. He's lying again. He's been lying throughout. He's been lying in the campaign. He won the referendum on life, and he's still lying. He is still lying.
No. Well,
Jeffrey, you can reply to Sophie.
well, I mean, first of all, you can't sit there accusing the British Prime Minister of lying. This is just a political mantra that we hear all the time from opposition
Or it's
parties.
the truth.
But he has been misleading information,
The
Jeffrey.
problem is that the obstacles are political obstacles. If there was the political will to find a solution, we could find that solution very quickly.
Okay,
right.
Shada.
But these negotiations, I mean, seriously, Jeffrey, I haven't heard about it. You know, the think tank world doesn't know, the journalist world doesn't know. So these negotiations, they're very confidential, I suppose, if they're taking place, and I don't think they are.
But what are they trying to do? Yeah.
But I think what is important, Jeffrey, is, you know, you say don't accuse the British Prime Minister of lying. But what we've seen in the last 3 years, not just with Boris Johnson, but before that, is really one after the other. Groundhog Brexit, just going on and on about the same things, not listening, what Sophie said, not listening to what the Europeans are saying. Our red lines are there. And the negotiations have to take place with two people or two parties that are willing to listen to each other. You can't just go into a negotiation, you know that,
Yes.
repeating the same thing over and over again.
Therefore, and Michel Barnier says, I have a mandate from the Council and I've delivered on my mandate. In that case, the European Council needs to give Michel Barnier a different mandate. They need to say to him, get a deal done now.
No, the point is that, you know, it has been until now very unclear what the mandate of the British Prime Minister is. There's only one element that's very clear in the mandate of the British Prime Minister, and that is that the Parliament doesn't want a no-deal Brexit.
So there are some that are saying that they're just running down the clock.
And he's ignoring it. He's actually sidelining. Imagine that, I don't know.
Do you think it's a strategy? Do you think it's a strategy, though, that they're just running down the clock and just reach the end of...
Well, there's certainly a strategy over here in the European Union, because they imagine, because they get all these siren voices coming over from other groups in the UK, they imagine if they hold out long enough and play tough long enough, that
he's just trying to get leverage then.
You know what,
these
siren voices are actually the other half of the people who voted Remain. And if you look at the polls, there may actually be more people. And if you are, because you are, you know,
I voted Remain. I'm like a large number of people that voted Remain. We have absolutely no affection for the European Union as such. We voted Remain purely on pragmatic grounds. We're perfectly content with the decision of the British people to leave the European Union. We want it to get it done as soon as possible. And I will say one more thing. It must be done in a way where we have good, positive relations between the EU and the United Kingdom in the future.
And
the way it's going on at the moment,
Jeffrey,
it will just end in dissonance.
Go ahead. This was not about no-deal Brexit. The referendum you had was not about the one we have now.
You're just repeating opposition statements.
But this is not the opposition. I'm not in the opposition. I work for an independent think tank.
This is what the world is saying, Jeffrey. The vote. It was a straight yes/no vote. Do you wish to remain in the European Union, or do you wish to
Okay, let's look forward a little bit.
Representative democracy, parliamentary democracy is what Europe is all about.
Exactly.
Do you like the fact that the Parliament is now really loggerheads with the executive? I mean, what kind of an example is the mother of all parliaments, democracy, giving to the rest of the world?
Well, because the conventions of our Parliament have been thrown overboard by the Speaker taking a very partisan position. That's what's happened in the Parliament.
Jeffrey, I think we're living on different planets, and this is something that I really am saddened about.
This is what we're seeing when we're watching. I mean, maybe we don't know what's happening behind the scenes. They don't want the media to know, whatever. But indeed, we have not heard, you know, from this side of the channel at least, the negotiations here seem to be, as we hear from officials here, stalling. Now, given that this is a scenario, is a deal even possible? Let's just try to take Boris Johnson's word for it. He says he's working for a deal. Is it even realistic that a deal is in sight?
Look, solutions can be found if both sides come to the table and talk rationally, but we're not listening to each other, and the rational argument is missing from the other side. Just to repeat the same thing over and over again.
Are we going back to the original plan, the 1.0? You know,
the point is, because, and I've been saying this for the last 2 years or so, the point is not that there's a difference between the EU and the UK. The point is that the UK politics cannot agree on, you know, what they want. The only element they agreed on was they don't want a no deal, and that's being ignored by Johnson. So, you know, what is it actually that we should negotiate on. There is just no...
Yeah.
Okay, what does the UK want? Last word before we go.
Well, I have to say that large parts of the so-called withdrawal agreement, and don't forget, we haven't even got on to the negotiation of the future relationship.
Well, exactly.
Right? This is only about the withdrawal agreement. Large parts of that are agreed. Our treatment of EU citizens, by the way, that's not, that's not being reciprocated in the same way by the EU, I have to say.
The member states, not the EU. The member states. Yeah,
and then we come on to this whole question of the Irish border. We mustn't do anything that in any way impacts on the sovereign integrity of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland.
So, I mean, even if the UK Parliament is away now for 5 weeks, I mean, there's a lot of things we can look out for, especially the summit happening here, whether or not anything is brought onto the table and whether the two sides are actually negotiating. Yeah. OK, coming up on Raw Politics, taking it to the streets, Italy's Matteo Salvini accuses Italy's new coalition government of, quote, escaping the vote. Could he be right? That debate is coming up next. Well, that was the moment yesterday that Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte won a vote of confidence in Parliament on his new government. And today he faced a second vote in the Senate. The coalition brings together rival parties of the Five Star Movement and the Democratic Party. Now, here is the Italian Premier after yesterday's vote addressing his biggest critics.
Io non ho mai detto e non dirò mai che voi avete tradito. Mi rivolgo alla Lega. Dico che mentre il Movimento 5 Stelle è stato coerente al proprio programma, voi dimostrate di essere coerenti alle vostre convenienze elettorali.
Meanwhile, outside of Parliament, a familiar face joined protesters. Former Interior Minister Matteo Salvini, who you might remember, he took a big political gamble last month when he pulled his League party out of the ruling coalition, leading to the resignation of Giuseppe Conte. That's why this is where we are now. And now on the outside of government, he is calling for fresh elections.
Possono scappare dal voto per qualche mese, ma non possono scappare dal voto all'infinito. E quando gli italiani tornano a votare, vinciamo noi, vincete voi, ne sono sicuro. È la mia parola. Non molliamo.
Well, joining us for this discussion, we have Paolo Borcia, an Italian MEP with the Identity and Democracy Group, and still with us, Jeffrey Van Orden, a British MEP with the European Conservatives and Reformist Group, and Shada Islam, Director of Europe and Geopolitics at Friends of Europe. Paolo, of course, I will begin with you. You know, we're calling it a failed gamble on Matteo Salvini's part, and now he's on the street calling for a fresh election. He has been sidelined. He has failed in what he wanted to do politically, has he?
No, I think that there were two alternatives on Mr. Mattarella's hands. He could call for elections, or he could look for a different majority, and he chose the second option. But Matteo Salvini was perfectly aware that there were those two possibilities, and from our side, we were aware that there was the possibility for Five Stars and Democratic Party to find an agreement on a very weak basis.
So you don't think your party was sidelined, the Lega party was sidelined?
No, I think that Italian people lost this challenge because I think that Italian people will is to have new elections, but the President of the Republic, according to the Constitution, took a different decision, and
I mean, it's interesting how you're painting it. You're saying the Italian people lost it. I mean, Shada, let's look at this from, is it, you know, if Matteo Salvini is still popular, is this underestimating the support of the people for someone like Matteo Salvini when you have, you know, the government or Parliament sidelining them, but people still want someone like Matteo Salvini?
I think we need to be very clear. He has been sidelined. And I think, populists have a playbook, which is to agitate and to stand outside the parliament and scream and shout and try and mobilize people. I really think, Paolo, that Salvini's popularity is on the decline. And if you look at some polls, that is clear. Also, I think Italian politicians have shown a degree of maturity and responsibility that I would wish, Jeffrey, that British politicians would show at this time as well. So you have an interesting parallel happening from a think tank point of view of seeing two ancient, well-respected democracies of Europe behaving in slightly different ways.
Before I go to Jeffrey, I'll let you respond to what Shada was saying.
Yes, I don't agree because today, this morning, I had a look to the most recent poll, and according to this poll, Lega is now at 33.5%, and so it's just minus 0.9 than European elections. And so after an operation with the government like this, I thought that people won't be able to understand the sense of this.
Yeah, so you're again bringing up the people. I want to pick up on what Shada was saying. Is this pitting the people against parliaments or people against their governments when you talk about popular politicians?
Playbook.
So is it?
Well, first of all, can I say I'm always very hesitant about commenting on the domestic politics of other countries. We have so many experts.
Well, you have examples in your country.
Well, we have so many experts now commenting about British domestic politics. So with hesitation.
We all have a dog in that fight.
And also, I would say about this populism, which is a favourite term now. Someone once said that populism was popular policies which you don't approve of, and that the fact is, Salvini's party is extremely popular in Italy. I think the only real parallel is they want to have elections as well. We have a government that wants elections, and we both can't get elections. That's the only parallel, really. We can't get the election we want.
Yeah, so the parallel. But is that underestimating what people want?
You see, when you talk about the people, and that's again the populist playbook. It's always about the people. Who defines the people? Who are the people? Which people are we talking about? In every country there are people who behave in one way or the other, have their likes and dislikes, and once again. We choose the people who we think like us. But there are many in Italy who I'm sure are relieved that your country is not running down the disastrous route that Salvini was sketching out for Italy.
Before,
which kind of disaster you're talking about?
Betraying all the fundamental values of the European Union. Italy, for God's sake, is one of the founding members.
Well, one Italian
just very quickly, we're running out of time.
One Italian elector on 3 voted for Lega at last European elections. So I don't think that Italian voters are crazy.
And very quickly before we go, is it going to be easier to deal with Italy now with this new government coming from you, from the EU?
It's, the new government is very unpopular and has a very weak mandate.
Okay, we'll leave it there for now. Coming up, still on Raw Politics, we want to hear from you on what you have been talking about. Are parliaments ignoring the will of the people, as we've been discussing here? Your call is coming up right after this program, and we want to hear what you think. You call us at 00800 333 7002. Of course, use the hashtag Raw Politics on social media and look for us on Skype as well. Is Boris Johnson bluffing?
I don't think that Boris Johnson is bluffing.
Of course he's not. He will go right to the line. Of the people who are bluffing...
He has most definitely put himself in a corner that he will find extremely difficult to get out.
Robert, what do you think? Is Boris Johnson bluffing?
He's definitely not bluffing. He's got his hands tied at the moment.
He's certainly bluffing when he claims that he can get a deal.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
Okay, those were the highlights from last night's Your Call show, and we're doing it all over again tonight. So tune in and call in after this program, 7 p.m. Central European Time and 6 p.m. if you are in the UK and Ireland. So I'll be hosting, and joining me will be 2 MEPs. We have Tanja Fajon, a Dutch MEP with the SND Group, and James Wells, a British MEP with the Brexit Party. So they'll both be with me in Your Call, and still with us here in the studio, Shada Islam from Friends of Europe. All right, these are the 3 questions, as always, we have every evening, and here they are.
This Commission will be a geopolitical commission.
Incoming European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen today unveiled her new commissioners. Together, they'll be responsible for charting the EU's course over the next 5 years. But if you were the EU's most powerful politician with a brand new team, what would you do? What should be Ursula von der Leyen's top priority? The British Parliament, suspended with just weeks until Brexit, and MPs didn't go quietly. Claiming the prorogation of Parliament is anti-democratic, tonight we're asking, is British democracy in danger?
I dittatori sono quelli chiusi dentro il palazzo che si vergognano a uscire per strada. Forse sono lì dentro i dittatori. Possono scappare dal voto per qualche mese, ma non possono scappare dal voto all'infinito.
Italy's Matteo Salvini, borrowing from the Boris Johnson playbook, accuses MPs of running scared of the people. Now sidelined, he wants to take down Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte's government and believes he's got the backing of the people. In Rome and London, politicians are pitting people against the parliaments. So we're asking, are parliaments ignoring the will of the people? Get involved and have your say, Europe. What should be Ursula von der Leyen's top priority? Is British democracy in danger? And are parliaments ignoring the will of the people? This is your call. How you get in touch. You can call us at 00800 3333 7002. Write to us, rawpoll@euronews.com, and on social media, use the hashtag #rawpolitics, and we're also on Skype. All right, first of all, Tanya Fajon is actually the Slovenian MEP. Not just to correct that. Okay, so let us, as it today, we have Ursula von der Leyen's team was revealed today. What do you think her top priorities should be?
I think she will have quite a challenging task how to make her commission more popular, closer to the citizens, more transparent, and really do its job, because what people, at least in the last European campaign, were saying, that the politics is made behind the closed doors, that the commissioners are sitting in a closed tower away from the citizens. And I think this will be very challenging, how to regain the trust of Europeans.
And James, what do you think she should be doing first?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that 100%. I think if you look at the way that she was elected, you know, that does highlight the democratic deficit in the European Union. And obviously the Brexit Party, we're fighting for democracy in the UK. So, and I think, you know, one of the reasons why we're seeing a growing Eurosceptic movement across Europe is because of the democratic deficit in the European Union. So I think that should be a top priority.
When it comes to that, do you think she's off to a good start? I mean, and what do you think her top priorities should be?
Well, I like the fact that she talked about a geopolitical commission. You know, we live in a dark and dangerous world. Brexit is part of it. And so I think it's quite important that she takes that global outlook. But I'm incensed at her choice of certain portfolios. And it's no surprise, being who I am, I'm really incensed at the fact that she talks about protecting the European way of life. What is she talking about? And why is she just talking about protection? I mean, Europe needs to be stimulated and encouraged to be more than it is. And protection is such a defensive word. I'm really appalled. And I think she should take lessons in language, proper language. And then...
There was a lot of things.
And then finally, just one more thing. She talks about diversity, and she talks about North and South, and men and women, and East and West, and all that. What about people like me? Ethnic minorities in Europe. We're part of this diversity. It's a very white commission. And in today's world, 21st century, 2019, I'm sorry, that doesn't
do you think she's going to have an
all.
easy time in Parliament?
Oh, no, I'm certainly not. With quite some designated commissioners, I think it will be very tough hearings. And we can already pick points, some of them, that certainly don't belong to the portfolios she designed.
All right, what do you think? Tough time for her to get this
I think she's
through?
going to have a very tough time. And if you look at the fact that she was the only person on the actual ballot paper in the election, and she still only got through by 7 votes.
Right.
I think that says everything.
I mean, we're going to be talking about this tonight on Your Calls, so do stay tuned and get in touch with us with the 3 questions that we asked. All right. Now, as if the House of Commons wasn't lacking in drama, John Bercow, he took MPs by surprise yesterday by announcing that he was standing down as Speaker. Now, love him or loathe him, his wit and soaring oratory has kept everyone glued to their screens. So before he hangs up his robes, let's take a look at some of the most memorable moments.
Throughout my time as Speaker, very rude, the members, order.
Mr. Speaker-elect, on behalf of the whole House, may I congratulate you on your re-election. At least someone got a landslide.
Order! There's no need for the honourable member for Dewsbury to chunt a ahoy there from a sentry position. You are an exceptionally boisterous fellow, and in the course of your boisterous behaviour, you appear to be chewing some sort of gum. That word must be withdrawn at once. At once! The Shadow Foreign Secretary has a name. And it's not Lady something. This kiss a ginger activity is probably perfectly lawful, but I've got no plans to partake of it myself. Order! I say to the Chancellor of the Duchy, spare us the theatrics! Behave yourself! Be a good boy, young man! Be a good boy! If you don't like it, you're perfectly entitled to your view. I couldn't give a flying flamingo what your view is. Thank you very much indeed.
I'll let our British MEP get the last word. One word to describe John Bercow.
Anti-constitutional.
Oh, well, that's a word to say goodbye. All right, thank you very much for watching us on Raw Politics. Stay tuned for your call. That's coming up next.